The U.S. Department of Justice now taking aim at the city of Chicago's hiring practices in the form of a civil rights investigation. This comes after remarks Mayor Brandon Johnson made at a Southside church on Sunday, where the mayor shared his vision for the rest of his term. He emphasized education, public safety, and equity, while also highlighting his diverse administration.
There are some detractors that will push back on me and say, the only thing that the mayor talks about is the hiring of black people. No, what I'm saying is when you hire our people, we always look out for everybody else. We are the most generous people on the planet.
The federal enforcement agency says it was Johnson's comments highlighting the number of black officials in his administration that prompted this investigation.
Business and economic neighborhood development, the deputy mayor, is a black woman.
Well, it turns out that Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson's loose lips may have landed him in a degree of trouble, although it certainly would not be the first time, considering he's already had the run-in with Tom Homan and ICE. But in this case, apparently now it would appear that the Department of Justice under the Trump administration is starting to do something that I have been wanting to see happen for a very long time, which is finally utilizing and applying civil rights law, ironically, perhaps you would say, but it's really not, against the woke activists. And what do I mean by that? Well, this is to say that if you have a nation, currently as we do, where ever since 1964, we have all these laws that are grounded in the basis of equality, right? You have to treat all people equally regardless of their race or gender. You cannot actively discriminate against one race or put them over the other when it comes to servicing or hiring or whatever. I've long begged the question, okay, then first of all, how is affirmative action in any way in compliance with other civil rights standards, considering you're actively discriminating against white and Asian students when it comes to school? Well, guess what? The Supreme Court just a few years back luckily struck that down. But now the case honestly has to come to the woke activists, because when it comes to the applications of Title IX and all these different anti-discrimination laws, it is a known and well-established fact that you have a new standard nowadays, right? The DEI system in the workforce, etc., to actively discriminate, oftentimes against white people, sometimes against Asians, but very often this is done in the name of left-wing identitarianism, left-wing, anti-white, all this stuff, and suddenly that's okay. So I've long said, okay, so why doesn't someone do a civil rights investigation against that? If you remotely have any signs that, hey, a bank, a company, a business is slightly discriminating against black applicants, there have been numerous lawsuits throughout the years where they've brought it, NAACP, all this stuff. Oh, let's sue them for $10 billion, whatever it is. So why does it never happen in the reverse now that we obviously have active cases of discrimination against white people, especially happening in the United States? Well, that is something the Trump administration is now doing, right? Using civil rights law against the woke activists, which frankly, they've been violating for years, and it is long past time we're finally holding them accountable. So with that said today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you about the brand new investigation that has been launched into Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson after he openly said he prioritizes the hiring of black people over other races, which guess what, right? If you say, I openly prioritize hiring white people over other races, people say, oh, that's so racist. You say black people? Nope, no one really bats an eye. Except for the fact that people should bat an eye, not only because that is also wrong, but particularly here because of the fact, I'll say this again, civil rights law mandates when it comes to hiring, you are not supposed to discriminate on the basis of race at all. So it is no different to prioritize black people in that case, right? Discriminating against all other races of people than to do with white people. Under the law, it is the same. So ladies and gentlemen, despite all the meltdowns you're about to hear from the Democrats about this, nobody is above the law, including woke activists. We're going to say that here again. We'll tell you all about it though. First, folks, do us a big favor. If you enjoy the content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe if you are new. Subscribing to the channel is the best way to stay up to date on all of our new videos and support our work and ensure that we can keep doing those videos. And with that in mind, I do want to first of all start off today's video by showing you the clip. This came out, I believe, just yesterday, where Brandon Johnson, so it would seem maybe accidentally, he let this slip in an interview where he admitted again that he is in violation of civil rights law because he racially discriminates on the basis of that factor when it comes to hiring people to work for his city. Take a listen for yourself.
Prime construction contract at O'Hare under my administration. It's the first black prime construction worker company to have a prime contract anywhere in the United States of America. And that's critical, not just for BOA Construction, but for the lives that he's going to transform because he's hiring them. But it's also critical for other major construction companies or mid-sized construction companies that are black owned to know that there is a mayor who sees them and is going to work hard to ensure that whether you're developing homes, whether you are, looking to help take advantage of the opportunities through aviation, whether it's entrepreneurship to provide a service, that there are resources available for you in the city of Chicago. And one thing that I know for sure that I have to do over these next 2 years, every single dime that our people have been robbed of, I want to make sure that that is returned 2-3-fold.
Yeah, well, I think he said that as clearly as you could possibly say it. It was incredibly straightforward. So let me once again ask the question. How is that not in blatant violation of civil rights law? Of course it is, right? The excuse that has been used for so long, whether it came to affirmative action and DEI, these things that are obvious racial discrimination. I think when it was affirmative action, they said, oh, we're not discriminating on the basis of race. Of course, that's not allowed. That's against civil rights. This is what they said literally about affirmative action in college. We're just using race as a factor to consider in the greater admissions process. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? If you use race as a factor, and somehow it's a consideration where, one is above the other, then inherently you're going to discriminate on the basis of race. Because if you're looking at this thing and it's like, okay, well, again, if race is a factor, then in that sense, you must prefer one race over the other, which means one race gets preferential treatment over the other, which was true, obviously, in the case of affirmative action. That is discrimination. And once again, I ask, how is that not in violation of civil rights law? Well, recently, thankfully, the Supreme Court ruled that it is. But similarly here in this case, they use the excuse with DEI. It's like, we're not discriminating. We just want to have DEI quotas. It's like, okay. So if you're maintaining some type of quota and a white applicant tries to come through the door, guess what? That white applicant gets discriminated against, which is again what? A violation of civil rights law, guys. This is not hard. This should not be controversial. But again, for some odd reason, woke activists for decades have been above the law. They've been allowed to get away with this no more. And we'll get to that in a second. First, though, I want to show you even more evidence of, Brandon Johnson being in ridiculous violation of civil rights law. But take a listen because the story gets significantly worse.
And one thing that I know for sure that I have to do over these next 2 years, every single dime that our people have been robbed of, I want to make sure that that is returned 2-3-fold, because I believe in something called press down, running over. That is what we have to make sure that happens within our communities.
Right, so he's out here talking about actively using his position in the government to funnel that back to one racial community of people, and that's essentially his purpose as a political leader here. So, that's what we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. Well, today, just hours after that news came out, it was announced by the DOJ Civil Rights Division, a proper use of it finally, by the way, because it's been weaponized for so long. How about you actually use it to evenly apply the law for once? Well, here you go. Has opened an investigation of the employment practices of the city of Chicago, Illinois, to determine whether it has engaged in a pattern of racial discrimination in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, as we keep on bringing up. Yes, they are in violation if what he's saying is what is actually happening, and that should be pretty indisputable. But let's read the statement for you today. Dear Mayor Johnson, the Department of Justice is opening an investigation to determine whether you are engaged in a pattern or practice of discrimination based on race in violation of Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act as amended Title VII. It is the responsibility of the Attorney General of the U.S. to enforce the provisions of Title VII with respect to state and local government employers. The Attorney General has delegated the authority to investigate compliance with these provisions to the Assistant Attorney General. Title VII prohibits the discrimination on the basis of race. Now, guys, keep in mind, okay? That's what Title VII says. You can't discriminate based on race. It does not say only white people can't discriminate on the basis of race. It means nobody can discriminate on the basis of race. So, if you have a problem with that, I don't know, ask your original civil rights heroes why they supported this stuff. But we're pointing this out. Now we're using the law as it's written. Okay, again, nobody's above the law. There you go. When the Attorney General has reasonable cause to believe that a state or local government employer is engaged in a pattern or practice of discrimination in violation of Title VII, it is the Attorney General's responsibility to take appropriate action to eliminate that violation, including seeking injunctive relief. Well, there you go. Hey, I say why not, right? They keep hitting these universal injunctions on all of the Trump administration's actions, right? Hey, this judge says you can't do that, temporary stay, restraining order, all this stuff. Why not do it back to them? That's brilliant. I love this. Okay, give them a taste of their own medicine. Again, nobody's above the law. Nobody's above the law. Okay, all right, find out then. Our investigation is based on the information you have made hiring decisions solely on the basis of race. There you go. In your remarks made yesterday at the Apostolic Church of God in Woodlawn, you, quote, highlighted the number of black officials in your administration. You then went on to list each of these individuals, emphasizing their race. Quote, business and economic neighborhood development, the deputy mayor is a black woman. Quote, Department of Planning and Development is black. Infrastructure deputy mayor. It goes on here. Let's go to the next page, last page here. Chief operations officer, budget director, senior advisor, yada, yada, yada. But you then said that you were, quote, laying these positions out to ensure that our people get a chance to grow their business, which suggests, right? I think he said it pretty clearly there. It's not a fact of like, he hired people, they just happen to be black. No, he intentionally set out these positions. He said he lays these positions out to ensure that a black person gets hired. Again, how is that not a violation of civil rights law? I think clearly it is. It is, right? Considering these remarks, I have authorized an investigation to determine whether the city of Chicago is engaged in a pattern or practice of discrimination as set forth. If these kind of hiring decisions are being made for top-level positions in your administration, then it begs the question whether such decisions are also being made for lower positions. Probably yes, obviously. It is important to note, we've not reached any conclusions. We intend to consider all relevant information, but there you go. There is the announcement from Harmeet K. Dillon, who is, of course, the Assistant Attorney General. So there you go. And look, to be clear, there's investigations all the time. I don't know where this investigation is ultimately going to lead, but I just find it, frankly, to be such a positive that for once, the DOJ Civil Rights Division, right, it's so satisfying to see civil rights law is being used against woke activists, woke racial activists. Because, yeah, newsflash, they're all in violation of it. This is nothing new, okay? It's probably happening at universities, even maybe corporations across this country, certainly in mayoral offices like this, etc. Probably in the Democrat Party positions, we know the story there. So great thing to see. Now today, ladies and gentlemen, shout out here to reporter William J. Kelly. Apparently, this reporter went and pressed Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson on the situation and basically asked directly, why are you a racist? Okay, so check out this response, and Brandon Johnson has bit of a meltdown over it, to say the least. Check it out.
Want the question?
Please.
Real Chicagoans want to know, why are you a racist? Mayor Johnson.
Yeah.
Please turn the mic on. Thank you. Real Chicagoans woke up this morning relieved that the Department of Justice is finally investigating your race hustle. As someone who grew up on the south side of Chicago, I've heard a lot of race hustlers in my life, trust me, but they were usually marching around outside of City Hall, which is what makes this so embarrassing and dangerous. Very, very dangerous to the city of Chicago.
Okay, we need the question.
I'm more than happy to ask this question. It's long overdue. For over a year, real Chicagoans, white and black, have been telling me that your black power rhetoric is bringing the city backwards from a place that
we need the question.
Had overcome. You want the question?
Please.
Real Chicagoans want to know, why are you a racist?
Well, first of all, I reject the idea and the premise that somehow that's an actual legitimate question.
You want that?
All right, we're going to go to the next one. Alice?
The next question, my follow-up question is a businessman, Robert Gomez, had his Riverfront restaurant license yanked. You said that the reason you hire black people is because they're the most generous race on the planet. His Riverfront restaurant license was yanked and given to a black restaurateur. That has, once again, reinforced the belief among real Chicagoans, white and black and Mexican, that you are a racist. What do you say to those people?
Again, I reject the premise that somehow that your question has any legitimacy. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. We'll go to Alice.
Thank you.
Nice. Shout out to that guy. No, he is a racist. Absolutely. Now, moving on here, in other similarly related civil rights news, I bring this up, I combine these stories because I think they both go to show how, again, finally here, we're using some type of civil rights statutes and laws and actually for good. You may know about the recent fight between the state of Maine and the Trump administration when it comes to the issue of transgenders, aka men playing in women's sports, right? That whole issue. And of course, it has been stated by the Trump administration, clearly, by the way, to be a Title IX violation. Yeah. You know, women's sports were basically created by Title IX, and that's what we have. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, the Supreme Court has also ordered for the Maine House to restore the vote of a lawmaker who was punished for the Facebook post on a transgender athlete. So basically, because this lawmaker went against the state of Maine when it came to, again, men playing in women's sports there, they tried to kick her, I believe it's a her, yes, out of the state house, right? They literally stripped her right to vote. So now the Supreme Court is weighing in and saying that person has to be reinstated into office. So the Supreme Court on Tuesday restored for now a Maine state lawmaker's right to vote in the state house after she was punished for a social media post that identified a transgender student athlete. The High Court granted the request for emergency relief sought by Laurel Libby, who represents House District 90, and was censured by her colleagues for a social media post that criticized the state for allowing transgender athletes at public high schools to compete in girls' sports. The online posting from Libby called out a trans athlete who competed in the state's track and field championship. So literally, all the state rep did was go out and basically say, I'm against men playing in women's sports. Hey, here's an example of that happening in this state. People are like, how dare you? That's so mean. I don't even understand. And by the way, okay, even if you're against what she said, that's worthy not just of censure, but of removal from the right to vote in the House. The people elected her, you know? It's like, that's what we're dealing with. Anyways, Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented from the Supreme Court's decision, as you could probably expect, by the way. 2 female liberal justices voted in favor of, not even being allowed to question men playing in women's sports. So, there you go. Pretty typical. Libby shared the post that sparked her punishment to Facebook in February and included photos and names of the athletes who placed first in the girls' pole vault. Maine allows transgender students to participate in athletics in accordance with their gender identity. The Justice Department has sued the state's Department of Education over its policy, which the Trump administration says discriminates against women in violation of Title IX. So that's why I say these two stories are connected, right? So before it was the trans playing in women's sports, right? Violation of Title IX, okay? Civil rights law. But I once again want to say, I also think this DEI stuff, right? The race-based hiring that goes just basically against white people in favor of non-white groups, that is also in violation not of Title IX, but of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So there you go. The suit came after President Trump signed an executive order in February barring transgender girls and women, aka, biological men, from competing on sports teams that align with their so-called gender identity. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Big picture here, right? Big story is things are starting to change. There you go. Finally, civil rights law, again, being used here against the woke activists. You love to see it. All right, with that said, though, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.